My ex-husband smiled in court like a man who had just won the lottery. He leaned back in his chair, adjusted his expensive watch, and whispered something to his lawyer that made them both grin. Across the room, I sat quietly with my hands folded in my lap. No diamonds. No designer bag. No dramatic tears. Just me, wearing a plain navy dress, and the same calm face I had worn through 2 years of being lied about, laughed at, and treated like a woman too tired to fight back. My name is Amara Cole. For 9 years, I was Amara Whitmore. That name had once felt like safety. Then it became a cage with gold paint. My husband, Preston Whitmore, had spent the last 6 months bragging that he had taken everything from me. The penthouse, the cars, half my savings, and finally, the $1 million he believed would break me. He had told friends I was finished. He had told his mother I would come crawling back. He had told his new girlfriend, Camille, that I was one of those women who looked strong until the paperwork started. And now, in family court, he was celebrating quietly because the judge had just reviewed the proposed divorce settlement. $1 million. That was what Preston thought he had squeezed out of me after claiming emotional distress, business sacrifice, lifestyle damages, and every other polished lie his lawyer could wrap in legal language. He thought he had won. He thought I was sitting there silently because I had nothing left. He thought my quietness was defeat. Then the judge looked over the top of her glasses and asked one simple question. "Mr. Whitmore, who is your wife's father?" The room changed. Not loudly, not at first. It was just a shift in the air. Preston's smile froze. His lawyer looked down at the papers in front of him, then back at the judge. My lawyer, Vivian Hart, did not move. She only uncapped her pen. That was how I knew she had been waiting for this. Preston gave a small laugh. "I'm sorry, Your Honor?" The judge repeated the question. "Who is your wife's father?" Preston turned slightly toward me, as if the answer were written on my face. For 9 years, this man had shared my home, my bed, my meals, my secrets, and my grief. Yet he had never truly known where I came from. He knew the version that served him. He knew I grew up in a quiet town. He knew my mother died when I was young. He knew I rarely spoke of my father. He knew an older man named Mr. Cole had walked me down the aisle and cried during the vows. But he had never cared enough to ask the right questions. And because he never asked, he never knew that the man he dismissed as your old-fashioned father was not poor. He was not powerless. He was not just a retired widower who wore simple suits and spoke softly. My father was Samuel Cole, founder of Cole Meridian Holdings, a private investment group with interests in shipping, property, food distribution, hospitals, and energy companies across 4 countries. A man worth more than Preston could imagine without feeling dizzy. A man who had hidden his wealth from public attention for most of his life because he believed money should build walls around family, not stages for strangers. And most importantly, the $1 million Preston had fought so hard to take from me was not marital money. It was a protected distribution from the Cole Family Trust, a trust my father had created long before I married Preston. A trust Preston's lawyer had failed to understand because Preston had been too arrogant to tell the truth about how little he knew. Preston cleared his throat. "Her father is Samuel Cole." The judge waited. Preston added, "He is retired, I believe." Vivian Hart finally looked up. "Retired from what, Mr. Whitmore?" Preston's lawyer shifted in his seat. "Your Honor, I'm not sure this is relevant to the final settlement." The judge did not look amused. "It became relevant when your client submitted financial claims against funds that appear to be protected under a family trust. I am asking because I want to know whether your client knowingly misrepresented the origin of those funds." Preston's face drained slowly, like someone had pulled a plug from beneath his skin. He looked at me again. This time, not with victory, with confusion, then fear. I said nothing. For years, Preston had called my silence weakness. In that courtroom, my silence finally became the one thing he could not control. Vivian stood. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, We have documentation showing that the $1 million Mr. Whitmore is attempting to claim was transferred to Ms. Cole from the Cole Family Trust as a restricted beneficiary distribution. It predates the relevant marital dispute, was never commingled into joint assets, and was placed in a protected account under the terms established by her father, Mr. Samuel Cole. Preston whispered, "What?" Vivian continued, "We also have reason to believe Mr. Whitmore was aware that Ms. Cole's family assets were separate, yet he instructed his counsel to present them as marital savings." His lawyer stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client made no intentional misrepresentation." The judge looked at Preston. "Then I will ask again, Mr. Whitmore, did you know who your wife's father was?" The room became so quiet I could hear the soft hum of the air conditioner. Preston swallowed. "I knew his name." "That is not what I asked." He stared at the table. "No, I did not know the extent of his business." The judge leaned back. "And yet you claimed financial entitlement to funds connected to him." Preston's lawyer whispered something urgently, but Preston was no longer smiling. His celebration was over, and mine had not even begun. "Before I continue, tell me where you are watching from tonight. And if you have ever been underestimated by someone who thought your silence meant you had no protection, stay with this story, because sometimes the person celebrating your loss does not know the judge is about to ask the one question that opens every locked door." I met Preston Whitmore at a charity dinner when I was 27. He was handsome in a careful way, the kind of man who checked his reflection in glass doors but made it look accidental. He came from a family that valued appearances more than honesty. The Whitmores were not billionaires, though they loved standing near billionaires. They had an old house, old connections, and old stories about past glory. Preston's mother, Diana Whitmore, spoke as if every room was improved by her entering it. Preston worked in commercial development. He was charming, ambitious, and hungry for a life bigger than the one his family could still afford. I should have recognized that hunger, but I mistook it for drive. He asked me about my work that night. I told him I helped manage philanthropic projects connected to education and housing. He seemed impressed. "Your family must be proud," he said. "My father is," I replied. "What does he do?" I said the same thing I always said. "He invests quietly." Preston laughed. "Sounds mysterious." "No, just private." That was true. My father had raised me to distrust loud wealth. He had grown up poor, built his first shipping contract from borrowed money, and never forgot what hunger taught him. By the time I was born, he had more money than most families could spend in generations, but I did not grow up spoiled. I grew up protected. There is a difference. My mother died when I was 11. After that, my father became soft and strict at the same time. He came to school meetings, packed lunches badly, learned to braid my hair from a neighbor, sat through my piano lessons even though he once confessed all classical music sounded like furniture moving. He loved me deeply, but he never let money become my personality. "Amara," he used to say, "if people only respect you after seeing your account balance, they do not respect you. They respect arithmetic." That was why I lived simply. That was why I did not arrive at parties with guards. That was why I worked in the family foundation under my mother's surname for years. That was why Preston never understood what he had married into. At first, I thought he loved my simplicity. He said I was refreshing. He said I did not chase status. He said he loved that I could sit in a small cafe without acting like the world owed me better chairs. I believed him. The first 2 years were beautiful enough to make me ignore the shadows. He brought flowers, called often, listened when I spoke about education projects, told me he wanted a marriage built on purpose, not performance. My father liked him at first, but not fully. After our engagement dinner, Dad walked me to the balcony and asked, "Does Preston ask questions after your answers, or does he only wait for his turn to speak?" I laughed. "Dad," he smiled sadly, "that is not an answer. He loves me. I hope so. But love that is not curious becomes ownership. I did not understand then. I do now." Preston changed after the wedding. Slowly. Not all at once. That is how control becomes difficult to name. He began correcting small things. What I wore to dinners. Which friends he thought were too informal. How I spoke to his mother. Why I did not use the Whitmore name more proudly in public. He loved my quietness when it made me elegant. He hated it when it made me private. His mother disliked me from the beginning, though she hid it well. Diana Whitmore wanted a daughter-in-law who would make the family look richer and obey like someone grateful to be chosen. I did neither. I was polite, but not impressed. That offended her. At our first Christmas dinner, she asked why my father had not bought Preston into one of his business ventures. I smiled. Because Preston has not asked him. She looked at me over her wine glass. A wife should know how to open doors for her husband. My father is not a door. Preston squeezed my knee under the table. Later in the car, he said, "You embarrassed me." I answered, "Your mother." You made it sound like I was begging. She made it sound like I should offer you my father's money. He went quiet. Then said, "Would that be so terrible?" That was the first time I felt something cold move through my marriage. The years that followed were full of small negotiations I kept losing. Preston wanted a bigger apartment, then a penthouse, then a car that matched his position, then introductions to people your father might know. I resisted some, gave in to others. Not because he forced me, because marriage had trained me to call compromise what was often surrender. The penthouse became our biggest argument. He wanted it badly. Said clients would take him more seriously. Said his career depended on being seen as successful. Said I did not understand how men in his field were judged. I told him we could afford a good home without performing wealth. He laughed. Easy for you to say. You grew up with invisible money. Some of us have to show progress. Invisible money. That phrase stayed with me. He resented what he claimed not to care about. Eventually, we moved. The penthouse lease was in both names, but most payments came from my account. Preston called that temporary. Temporary became normal. He used my taste to impress clients, my contacts to gain meetings, and my calmness to polish his image. In public, he called me his anchor. At home, he called me difficult when I refused to keep floating him. Then Camille entered. Camille Ross. Luxury marketing consultant. Loud laugh. Perfect hair. Expensive perfume. The kind of woman Diana Whitmore immediately adored because she looked like the daughter-in-law she had ordered from her imagination. Camille started as Preston's consultant for a development project. Then became his brand advisor. Then his dinner companion. Then the woman whose messages appeared on his phone at midnight. When I confronted him, he said, "Camille understands the pressure I am under." I said, "So do I. I'm paying for half of it." His face hardened. There you go again. Money. Men love money until a woman mentions where it came from. The affair became undeniable when I saw them at a restaurant. Not in a hidden corner. In the center of the room. Preston's hand over hers. Camille laughing. Diana seated beside them. My mother-in-law. At dinner with my husband and his mistress. That was the night something in me stopped begging for dignity from people who had already spent it. I filed for divorce 3 weeks later. Preston was shocked. Not because he loved me too much to lose me, because he did not believe I would move first. His kindness returned briefly. That old, dangerous kindness. He came home with tired eyes and soft apologies. Said he was confused. Said Camille meant nothing. Said marriage was hard. Said I was throwing away years. I wanted to believe him. But I had seen Diana at that table. And there are some humiliations too organized to be accidents. When kindness failed, he became cruel. He claimed I was emotionally cold. Claimed I used money to control him. Claimed he sacrificed career opportunities for my family's privacy. Claimed I had hidden assets. That part made me laugh when my lawyer first read it. He says, "You hid assets?" Vivian asked. I nodded. In a sense, yes. She looked at me. My father's business is larger than Preston knows. How much larger? I told her. Vivian leaned back. Then smiled slowly. Oh, this will be interesting. The divorce became war because Preston thought war would frighten me. He hired an aggressive lawyer. leaked stories to friends, told people I had abandoned him, suggested my father was an old man with modest savings and that I had manipulated him. He filed claims against accounts he believed were marital property. He pushed for the $1 million account hardest because he thought it was my emergency fund. It was not. It was a trust distribution my father had transferred years earlier with strict protections. Vivian wanted to correct the record immediately. My father advised patience. "Let him show the court who he is," Dad said. I sat across from him in his library, angry and exhausted. Why should I let him lie? Dad poured tea. Because some lies become useful when people sign their names under them. That was my father. Gentle voice. Dangerous paperwork. So we waited. Preston celebrated every small delay as victory. He posted photos with Camille. Diana told relatives I would learn humility. Camille posted a picture of a champagne glass with the caption, "New beginnings taste expensive." I did not respond. Silence is difficult when people mistake it for fear. But my father had taught me that not every battle deserves noise before the door closes. Then came the final hearing. Preston arrived confident. Camille was not allowed inside the courtroom, but I saw her in the hallway before proceedings began. She wore white, like she was attending a victory ceremony. She looked me up and down. "Amara," she said, "you look tired." I smiled. "Camille, you look early." "For what?" "Your lesson." Her smile faded. I walked past her. Inside, Preston grinned through the first hour. His lawyer argued that the $1 million represented marital financial capacity and should be considered part of equitable division due to Preston's lifestyle dependence during the marriage. Lifestyle dependence. A beautiful phrase for a grown man wanting money from a woman he betrayed. Vivian said little at first. She allowed them to speak, allowed them to repeat, allowed them to build the wrong house brick by brick. Then the judge reviewed one document more carefully, the trust statement, the transfer note, my father's signature, the origin account. Her eyes narrowed. And then she asked, "Mr. Whitmore, who is your wife's father?" That question ended the performance. Vivian presented the documents clearly. The Cole Family Trust had been established before my marriage. The funds were restricted. The account had never been mixed with marital assets. Preston had no legal claim. More importantly, his filings suggested he had treated the account as shared marital savings, despite having no evidence. The judge was not pleased. Judges do not like arrogance disguised as confusion. Preston's lawyer requested a recess. The judge denied it. Camille was later called into the hallway after Preston's lawyer needed additional documents. I did not hear their conversation, but I saw her face through the glass panel when Vivian submitted proof that Preston had promised Camille money from the divorce settlement as part of a property investment plan. She went pale. That was my favorite part. Not because another woman was hurt, because she learned that a man who betrays one woman with money will often deceive the next woman with the promise of it. By the end of the hearing, the judge rejected Preston's claim to the trust funds. She ordered further review of his financial disclosures, including possible misrepresentation of business debts he had attempted to assign partly to me. The $1 million remained mine. Protected. Untouched. Preston walked out of the courtroom without his grin. Camille stood when she saw him. "Well?" she asked. He did not answer. Diana, who had come dressed like a queen mother, asked, "What happened?" I walked past them with Vivian beside me. Camille grabbed Preston's arm. "Did you get it?" He looked at her. No words. That was answer enough. I stopped near the exit and turned back. Not dramatically, just enough. "Preston," I said. He looked up. I smiled softly. "My father sends his regards." His face twisted. I left before he could answer. Outside, my father was waiting beside his car. Simple gray suit. No bodyguards visible, though I knew two were nearby. He opened his arms. For the first time that day, I cried. Not because of the money, because it was over. Because the man who had tried to reduce me to a settlement had been defeated by a truth he never cared enough to learn. My father held me and whispered, "You did well, little star." That was what he had called me when I was a child. Little star. I laughed through tears. I sat quietly. "Yes," he said. "Sometimes that is the hardest thing to do while fools celebrate." The weeks after court were messy. Preston tried to apologize. Not immediately. First, he tried anger, then blame, then claims that his lawyer had misunderstood, then messages about how marriage should not end this way. I ignored most of them. Finally, one evening, he sent a long email. "Amara, I did not know who your father really was. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it is true. I thought you were hiding ordinary money, and I reacted badly. I was angry. I felt small in our marriage. Camille made me feel seen. My mother pushed me, but I made choices. I am sorry for the way I treated you." I read it twice, then forwarded it to Vivian. She replied, "Do not answer emotionally. He is still negotiating with consequences." She was right. I never replied directly. Through lawyers, we finalized the divorce properly. Preston received what was fair, not what he demanded, not what he celebrated. Fair. That felt better than revenge. Fairness is quieter, but cleaner. Camille left him within 3 months. The property investment plan had depended on money he did not get. Love built on expected settlement money rarely survives account balance reality. Diana called my father once. I do not know what she said. But Dad told me afterward, "Mrs. Whitmore has discovered humility as a foreign language." I laughed for 5 straight minutes. 1 year after the divorce, I moved into a small house near the water. Not because I could not afford bigger. Because I wanted peace. I put my mother's photo in the hallway, my father's favorite chair in the study, and fresh flowers in the kitchen every Friday. I continued working with the foundation, but I also started a program for women navigating financial control in marriage. We taught records, trusts, separate property, business ownership, and the emotional side of leaving people who confuse access with love. At our first workshop, a woman raised her hand and asked, "How do you stop feeling guilty for protecting money from someone you once promised to share life with?" I answered honestly, "You may feel guilty for a while. Protection can feel like betrayal when you were trained to overgive. But the right person does not need you unprotected to feel loved." She cried. So did I later, in the car. Healing is not a straight road. Sometimes you win in court and still cry in parking lots. Sometimes you keep the money and still grieve the marriage. Sometimes the man who hurt you loses, and you feel relief instead of joy, because part of you remembers when you loved him. That is okay. Pain does not mean you chose wrong. It means the story mattered before it broke. People heard different versions of what happened. Some said I trapped Preston. Some said I hid wealth. Some said he deserved to know. Those people missed the point. Preston did not lose because my father was rich. He lost because he was greedy, careless, and arrogant enough to claim what he never understood. He could have asked me about my family with love. He could have respected my privacy. He could have built his own life honestly. He could have left without trying to turn betrayal into profit. Instead, he celebrated taking my $1 million before knowing where it came from. And the judge asked one question: "Who is your wife's father?" That question was not really about my father. It was about truth. Who is this woman you underestimated? Where did her strength come from? What protection did you ignore because you were too busy mocking her silence? What story did you fail to learn because you thought being her husband meant you already owned the ending? My father did not save me that day. He protected what he had built for me long before I needed it. But I saved myself by finally letting the truth stand without apologizing for it. That is what I want every woman listening to remember. Know what is yours. Know what is shared. Know what is protected. Know what is written down. Love fully, but do not become financially blind. Do not let shame stop you from asking questions. Do not let romance rush you past paperwork. Do not let someone call you cold because you believe records matter. And never assume the person sleeping beside you knows your worth simply because they know your name. Preston knew my name. He did not know my story. He knew my face. He did not know my foundation. He knew my silence. He did not know my strength. He celebrated taking my $1 million in divorce, until the judge asked who my father was. Then he learned what many arrogant people learn too late. You should never count money that belongs to a woman you never truly bothered to understand.